All right. What's going on, everybody? Needs more drums back in City Skylines on our Costa Azzurra map. About to do some expansion in the city, and we actually just hit the Worthy Village milestone. So that means that I can finally have access to this building themes mod, which is awesome because now we can actually create our own custom themes and have a kind of, pick what buildings we want to grow. It definitely beats placing everything down by hand. And this mod has been kind of broken for a little while, so I'm super glad that it's finally back, and we're definitely going to use it in our expansion. All right, so I just went through and created a few building themes here so that we can apply them to our city, make some districts. Actually, yeah, let's do that real quick. This one will just be the riverfront, and we'll do that later. This one will be just industry for now. Also, let's fix our water here since some of these guys don't have any. Gotta do that. But all right, now that we got our situation kind of sorted out here, let's jump into a time lapse, and I'm just gonna see how much expansion we can do at the time that we have. All right, so just getting started with the time lapse here. This is my first time ever doing one of these, as might be expected, this being my second video in City Skylines. But yeah, I think this is a nice speed. Just, not too fast, not gonna, make you guys go crazy. I know sometimes I watch some guys doing time lapses and it's like, you can't even see what's going on the screen because the cursors are just flying around like crazy. So hopefully this isn't too bad. But yeah, so what are we doing here? This is still, pretty early on in the stages of the city. So kind of hitting some of the essentials here, like, putting down that clinic that you just saw me do right here. I like these kind of weird city blocks, when they're not just a perfect grid shape. It's nice to fill these with, some different schools or parks. This, I thought would be a good spot for an elementary school, and that's a good way to kind of fill some of the space. And another thing too about schools, it's actually, if you read up on it, there's actually the possibility of over-educating your Sims early on in the game that can create some problems in the future. So don't focus on, spending all of your money just on education, and kind of, start small with the elementary schools and kind of work your way up as your city grows. And here, just finding a good place for our landfill, I figured maybe we could use this kind of whole little oddly shaped area kind of to that left of the landfill too, and make it sort of like a waste processing complex, with some recycling centers and such in the future. And yeah, as you can see, we got our forest brush working again. Just had to simply unsubscribe and resubscribe. Got that working. Very good. But yeah, so now we're starting to get some of our city services really ready to go. And as always, early on in the city, trying to keep an eye on the budget. Notice that some people are complaining about either a lack of power or a lack of water, and that can easily be fixed, without having to build another facility, because we just lowered our funding on that to save some money. And we're still, turning a nice profit for a small city, so can't really complain there. And yeah, just, thinking about expanding out these suburbs, I kind of liked where that cemetery was. So that just is part of the map, and I kind of want to keep that. Even as the city develops, I think that would be kind of a cool, little historical landmark. Maybe, you like to imagine that that's maybe where some of the founders of the city are buried, and we like to preserve that area as sort of a historical property. And yeah, just right now keeping it to the dirt roads. No need to go overkill on spending a lot of money on some nice roads. I do start upgrading a little bit to the suburban streets, but again, trying to, in the interest of saving some money, not doing that too much. And here you can see that I actually did get the building themes mod working again. I have a couple themes for the city. I think for this part, I wanted to go for kind of like the old type of building sort of look. So maybe some of those, like King Leno's college university pack works really well with that. And, also some assets that I downloaded from the workshop that I've had for forever. Some different, bungalows and such, and some old kind of stone buildings that you'd find in, maybe an older East Coast city like Philadelphia, or, like a Midwest city like Chicago. Some of those are Chicago themed assets, which, kind of a tribute to where I'm from. So I always like to, kind of include Chicago assets in all of my builds one way or another. But yeah, you know, building themes are super helpful in giving your city some distinct looks. You know, that, like I said, this will be a little bit of an older spot, and then I have some other themes with the mid-century modern pack and some other more, you know, modern-looking buildings that I have that I'll put, you know, maybe in some of the other future expansions, which I think are we about to do right now? Yes. Yeah. So this district here, I just decided to plan this out as being sort of like our western suburb, kind of split by that main road there. And yeah, west. East, west, SpongeBob, anyone? No? Okay. Anyway, yeah, so we just reached Tiny Town. Awesome. Finally got our landscaping. But yeah, I figured, you know, those west suburbs would be a good place to put some of those more modern buildings. So I have the Boomer Home collection. It's like a set of little Australian based suburban houses, and then the mid-century modern pack that's on the Steam or not the workshop. That's on the it's a content creator pack. That's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, so give some variety in our suburbs already. And then yeah, one thing, you know, you notice I need some cops because we don't have any of those in the city. And this is another asset that I grabbed. I don't remember who it's by, but it's a cool little police station, and you know, a little more of a modern look and kind of better than the vanilla one in my opinion. So I always like to put that in my cities. And then yeah, you know, another good asset that kind of really fills space well is parking lots. I like to put down some parking lots, you know, oftentimes around my schools, police stations, fire stations, and you know, just kind of put them around my commercial zone. I think it helps, you know, fill some of those awkward spaces, and helps, you know, give a more realistic look too when you're planning out those areas, because you know, they usually have a lot of concrete, a lot of pavement, and that helps kind of get rid of some of those weird sort of green spots of grass in between buildings that, you know, wouldn't usually be there. Yeah, and this is another thing that I absolutely have, you know, a few too many of is fire stations. I always like to have a lot of a variety in my fire stations and police stations in my cities, especially because, fun fact of the day, I want to be a volunteer firefighter. I've always, you know, it's kind of run in my family being a firefighter, and as I, you know, get older and you know, I have a full-time job now, but depending on where I end up sort of settling down, so to speak, where I end up moving to in the future, I want to, you know, if there's a local volunteer fire department, I really want to get on the department and, you know, get my training in, because it's kind of like the best of both worlds. You know, you can have a full-time job and still be a firefighter on the side, and I think it's really, really cool. So looking forward to that later in life. But yeah, that's why you'll see me, you know, have a lot of different fire stations, because it's something that I kind of care a lot about. So, yep, just a disclaimer. This is something that I always like to do with my schools. I always like to make a little bit of a school complex, so to speak. So, you know, I'll always put down like a playground, and a basketball court or a tennis court or something, and then kind of put down some trees and stuff, because, you know, in the real world, oftentimes if you have a little bit of space, a school will have, you know, a little bit of take up a little more space than just a regular building. They're not usually crammed into, you know, some tiny part of a city block. You know, it's usually a little bit more of a complex, especially high schools. High schools take up a big area, but we won't have any of those yet. And this is something that I always like to do. You know, I don't like at least the old vanilla trees. I don't like them, so I have a mod called Vanilla Trees Remover that actually gets rid of all of the vanilla trees on all the buildings. And instead, it takes just a few minutes to go through and kind of put down some trees after your city starts to develop. And so I like to do that because, I mean, just you know, if you look before and after I put down some of these trees, it just gives this little neighborhood that we've built a whole new life. And, you know, trees are something that really just makes a city, yeah, like I said, just come to life. Honestly, I don't know how else to put it, but yeah, if you ever struggle with getting your cities to look, you know, realistic, or your suburbs especially, try putting down some trees if you don't have any yet. It'll, you know, kind of hide some of the big bare spots that, you know, are in between the buildings. And it also just, you know, every city's got trees, especially in some of the lower density areas like this. And so it's always, you know, a good way to make your cities look more realistic. And you can use them like I'm doing here to kind of separate the you know, the residential from the commercial, and sort of you know, hide some of those buildings from the people's homes. And I think that would be something that, you know, an urban planner, or, you know, not that I am one, but an urban planner might consider is, you know, how can we make these, you know, give the residential areas some more privacy from the, you know, more busy commercial areas. And a lot of times just trees are the answer. And, you know, it's natural and they're, you know, nothing but beneficial, really. So, yeah, good habit of putting out some trees. Now back over in our industrial area here, just trying to, you know, plan some more roads, figure out where we're going to go. It's kind of weird with this sitting up on a hill. So again, this might be a good opportunity for a little bit of a tree line kind of along the highway there that's actually already there. But, you know, keeping that and maybe, you know, putting a few more trees there in the future to kind of make that barrier between, you know, the road and the actual sort of the industrial zone, rather than having some steep, you know, weird cliff, sort of creating, you know, using that space and kind of creating a little bit of a separation there. Yeah, and so now it is time to kind of keep, you know, just getting rid of these, or not getting rid of them, but adding some commercial zones. And another thing that I like to do is add fences. I think fences add a very realistic touch to your city, especially when you use them to sort of section off little service buildings, or like I did right there for the school. As you can see, the little wooden fence there, you know, those kind of really help to again, just make your city look more realistic. That's something that doesn't take a lot of time at all. And now just going through upgrading some of these roads, because we're finally kind of making enough money to where we don't have to look like our city's in the middle of nowhere. You know, it's actually starting to look like a proper town. So getting some paved roads makes a huge difference. And I don't know what this intersection was that I built, but it is very bad. So I just said, let's delete that because it looks terrible. And it's not really functional, and I couldn't think of a way to make it functional. So I just gave up and said, yeah, we don't need that right now. And then here, like I said, just keeping that area between those two blocks, you know, by that cemetery, keeping that open for now and leaving some space for a future, maybe additional cemetery or a future park or both. I'm thinking I might just make a cemetery complex, you know, there. And once we get unlocked the need for death care, I can put, you know, a cemetery by that historical cemetery and make it sort of a cool little area. And here, just trying to fill the space again, just, you know, using it some curvature, trying to follow the curve of that road up above, and, you know, making that area a little bit more unique rather than just building out the grid, because, you know, who wants to just see a grid all day? I mean, I know I don't. It gets very boring. To me, it gets boring to build in grids. I like, you know, grids are efficient, they're functional, but at the same time, switching it up a little bit and, you know, kind of having different sets of grids throughout your city helps make it look a little more natural. And, you know, using things like natural landscapes and, you know, kind of different size and shaped areas to break apart your grid and, you know, utilize some space in a different way. So that helps, you know, make your city look a lot more natural than just being some, you know, huge development that was put together in like a couple hours. All right, and now going back to our industrial zone, I was wondering a little bit why the buildings weren't growing, and I was like, well, there's, you know, definitely a demand for industry. I don't know why my new industrial zones aren't developing yet. And I actually realized that it was because of my building themes mod. I had the building themes enabled for the whole city, but I didn't allow the buildings that weren't in a theme that I made. So I didn't, you know, make an industrial theme yet. So none of the industrial buildings are part of a theme. Therefore, if I don't have that box checked, the box that says include buildings that aren't in a theme, then those buildings won't spawn. So I realized that in a little bit, and I definitely fixed that issue. So they should be popping up pretty soon. As soon as I realized, yeah, right there. If I enable theme management, and then I need to allow the buildings that aren't in a theme. or maybe not. Maybe I just needed to deselect those other themes. But either way, it works. My building started to develop, and I was very happy with that. So yeah, so here, like I said, I think I mentioned this in the last video, where I like to kind of go through and make industrial complexes rather than just having the building sort of wall to wall. And this is one of those times where I went through and used Surface Painter, which for me still works. I know a lot of people are having problems with it since the update, but for me it was working just fine. And a few of the mods got updated, but that one I didn't need to update. But either way, yeah, making these little complexes and putting in some fences, and then I like to add kind of some props, such as containers or little piles of crap or whatever, or some trailers, etc. And that helps kind of give these, it makes your industrial areas look alive, so to speak, active. If you just have the buildings and some big concrete areas, there's just some blank concrete areas, it doesn't really seem like anything's going on. But when you add just, if I'm not talking going crazy with the decals or anything, but if you just add, some little props here and there, and some little decals, maybe like some skid marks or some dirt, it really helps make your industry look like things are actually being, the businesses are actually producing things, and things are moving around, and goods are getting delivered. So something I always like to do. Another thing that I like to do in my industry areas, or any part of the city for that matter, but hey, Boomtown, awesome. But anyway, especially in my industry areas, is sometimes make some little like abandoned dirt lots where, maybe a building would have been in the past, or, maybe where a factory has some land, but they just use it to, store a bunch of stuff, and it just kind of has gotten a little bit, fallen by the wayside, and, people don't really, nothing is built there. So I kind of like to do that. I think it helps break up your industry areas a little bit, and that's something that, I know where I live, there's a lot of industry by me, and whenever I'm driving around there's a lot of just empty lots just filled with, scrap metal, or, piles of dirt or whatever. Thought it'd be a good idea to save the game. don't wanna lose that. But yeah, very important to always save your game once in a while to avoid a crash, which haven't had any of those in a long time, but fingers crossed, but you never know. I know there have been a couple times where I've been playing and my game crashes, and then I get really sad because I lose everything and go cry a little bit and don't play City Skylines for like a month. But anyway, yeah, so this road, the reason that I didn't connect it to that one is because I kind of wanted to leave a little bit of a kind of make that power plant sort of on its own. And I was thinking that, I'll come back to that later and detail that area up a little bit and sort of make it its own little complex. So I wanted to keep that, separate from the rest of the industrial zones. And then, I don't like to go crazy with terrain editing. Like I said, I like to build around some of the natural features, and I think it really helps, having some interesting designs in your roads. If you, follow sort of the curvature of a hill or a mountain, it'll, avoid you from making some just plain straight grid roads. But yeah, and in this case, since it's going to be an industry area, and this is probably going to be where part of our city is going to grow, I feel like I don't want it to be the height differences to be too crazy. So I like to kind of smooth it out a little bit and make the transitions a little bit more subtle. It helps avoiding some crazy cliffs and everything that just look unnatural in a real dense area, even in an industry area, but still a dense industry area nonetheless. And as we're letting that develop, I figured this would be a good time to come back over to our new district that we mapped out a little while ago. And so just putting down some of the groundwork for our roads. At first I was trying to get it to kind of follow those roads very nicely, but then I thought this might be a good opportunity to switch up the grid a little bit and follow the angle of that main road instead. So, as you can see, I'm doing that here, and I do like to switch up the angle of my grids I know I've been talking about that a lot today, but it's just, something that a lot of people I feel like don't do. They just expand the same grid, and well, it's very fast in this game, and it's a very easy thing to do, and it is efficient. It just doesn't look natural. Cities aren't all the same grid all the time, and I'm sure there are some that are. Don't quote me on that, but for the most part, there'll be kind of different areas of districts of the city will develop in their own way and around some different landmarks or some different roads, or where maybe a railroad used to go. So I like to incorporate those things into my developments. Yeah, I know another thing that you've been seeing me do in this time lapse is go through and get rid of some of this yellow terrain, this fertile land. So it looks good on the map when there's nothing built, but as these cities start to develop, obviously this isn't going to be all farmland. So I like to go through and make the grass a little bit greener and get rid of some of those. I think it really helps make the city look nice, look like something's actually being built here, and so something that just a little touch. Love to use the terrain and the different terrains to the advantage of achieving a certain aesthetic, and it definitely helps here for sure. So now this road I felt like will eventually be more of a main road from connecting these two little sections of, well, I guess you can call them suburbs for now, but they probably won't be suburbs in the future. But just laying the groundwork there, kind of designating that road as being one of those main connection points from the east to west parts of the city. And it's important, to kind of lay these things out early, so that when your city is expanded later, you sort of have an idea of where you want that expansion to occur, and where there might be some roads that are going to be upgraded to bigger roads, or maybe even eventually highways. But planning that on early on in your city is it's a little more beneficial than trying to think of it after the fact. So I tend to do that a lot, just thinking, like I mentioned earlier, with this little cemetery or park there, kind of thinking about where I want some of the centerpieces of the city to be, and then I can sort of build around those and try to leave some space for some future bigger developments, some bigger parks, etc. Just taking some time here, detailing up this little school. I always like to detail up the school complexes, as I mentioned before, and it doesn't take long to make a little park, and always having some green space in the city is very useful in breaking up your grid. I know it sounds like a broken record, but it's very useful in keeping a little bit of a breaking up the grid, like I said, and keeping some different can't think of the word, making some different areas in your city, I guess, rather than just all buildings and all houses. It gives your citizens a chance to get out, get some fresh air, and not be living in a concrete jungle for all their life. All right, guys, well, that's about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. We've done quite a bit of expansion in the city, and I am really looking forward to the next episode. So until then, have a great rest of your week, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace.